feels like a lifetime's work. So I've been making documentaries for 40 years, but the exhibition on screen cinema series has been going now for about 15 or 16 years. These particular 5 films, before COVID, our films were doing very well in Colombia. We had a very strong audience, very loyal audience. Then COVID arrived in 2020 and that interrupted things. One of the 5 films, Raphael, was made in 2020. And it's a superb film. And finally now we have the chance to release it in Colombia. All of the films take an enormous amount of work, but we love what we do. We love storytelling with some of the greatest art that humankind has ever produced. We're coming back with 5 films. We made a film based on the biggest exhibition of Raphael ever, on his 500th anniversary. Spectacular works. It really helps you to understand why he is considered to be as great as Leonardo and Michelangelo. And then there is also a film about Michelangelo, arguably, for some, the greatest artist of all time. Certainly, I would argue, one of the greatest sculptors of all time. Remarkable story. Another rival, if you like, for the greatest artist, certainly out of Western Europe, of all time, is Vincent van Gogh. We have a film called Van Gogh, Poets and Lovers. This was a collaboration with the National Gallery in London. It is their most successful ticketed exhibition ever. And you think how many exhibitions the National Gallery in London have had. It was extraordinarily successful, and we had the exclusive access to make a film about the exhibition and therefore about Van Gogh. And to once again try to make people realize that Van Gogh, his paintings are not expressions of his mental health. They are expressions of a man who was extremely passionate about art, extremely well-read and educated, and a master storyteller. He's trying to tell you stories with every painting. The 4th film of the 5 is another film at the National Gallery, and one that I'm very proud of and has had remarkable audience reaction, because we decided not to make a film with curators and art historians, but with the people who actually work at the National Gallery, the people who are security guards or work behind the scenes in the offices or whatever it might be. What are their favourite paintings and why? And I was so moved and impressed with how articulate they are, their choices, some of which are paintings you'll know, many of which are paintings you won't know. And each of them gives additional insight into those paintings. But what's so striking is how people bring their own lives, their own biography, to their choice of their favourite painting. It's a really powerful, moving film with a few celebrities who have interest in art thrown in. And it was also the occasion of the 200th anniversary of the National Gallery. So, and the last one of the 5, although it might not be in this order when they're shown in Colombia, is called Dawn of Impressionism, Paris 1874. It's a really interesting film because it asks, the Impressionists are the world's favourite art movement. Monet, Renoir, Degas, etc. Well, what we ask in the film is, why Paris? Why 1874? And why these individuals? And it's really, if you don't understand the context, what else is happening in Paris at that time, why they wanted to have their own show, even though it was so unsuccessful, but nevertheless, it was the beginning, if you like, of the Impressionist movement. It's a fascinating film. And the exhibition, which we based it on, was in Paris and in the National Gallery of Art, Washington. So a very successful film for us and a really interesting subject. We've managed to build a network of 60 countries showing our films in the cinema. from India to Japan to all over. We're just about to start in China. But until COVID, one of the top 10 countries, alongside France, Germany, England, Australia, United States, Canada, was Colombia. And I absolutely loved that. I used to get messages from people coming out of the cinema in places like Medellin. Now, to me, I only had one impression of Medellin, and that was, from what I read in newspapers or watching drama. And then I'd get a nice email from somebody saying, I've just come out of the cinema, I've just seen your film about Claude Monet. The cinema was absolutely full. Thank you so much for bringing this to Medellin. I can't tell you how inspirational and how gratifying that is for me. Because it shows one absolutely key thing, which is that art is universal. Because the human experience is universal. Colombians, there'll be certain traits that might be different, but essentially, a Colombian is exactly the same as a Briton. And, those countries that seek to suggest there are differences, we're all essentially the same. Of course we are. And art can reflect that. I mean, I wish, we self-fund our films, so it's difficult for us to choose artists that most of my countries have not heard of. But I hope one day I can find some topic, some way of looking at Latin American art. I have tried. I guess the nearest we got was in Mexico with Frida Kahlo. But anyway, I really do encourage anybody in Colombia. One, because these are very entertaining films. The cinema is the best place to see them. Allow yourself 90 minutes. I mean, you're in the company of some of the greatest artists in human history. You cannot be too busy to ignore that, to avoid that. You're going to be inspired. You're going to be entertained. The reason these artists are so fabulously popular is because their storytelling resonates with us today. What a Michelangelo is telling you or a Raphael is showing you is the same today as it was 500 years ago, more or less. And I think that's fascinating. And I think that I know the audience reaction to the films is so strong. I know that millions of people will go and see the latest Mission Impossible, where 100 people will die, and it'll be very exciting because Tom Cruise will be hanging off a helicopter. I get that, but actually, you'll learn more about humanity and about yourself, and in fact, in some ways, come out feeling better about everything if you come and see one of our films. I have to tell you.
Cine, música, series, libros, teatro, artes plásticas, gastronomía, todo el mundo de la cultura y el entretenimiento aquí en El Tiempo. Suscríbase al canal de YouTube del Tiempo, que además es gratis, y le mandamos notificaciones de nuevos videos.